Hi everyone, my name is May Park. Welcome to another video tutorial at my blog and YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how to color your floral images using Mijello Mission Gold watercolor set. This video is part of Simon Says Stamp one-of-a-kind blog hub celebrating a release of brand new products. Make sure to check out my blog for more details and leave a comment on my blog hub post for a chance to win a $25 gift certificate to Simon Says Stamp online store. For today's project, I'm going to use the bouquet of thanks stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I test out my card design on a print paper for stamping reference. I'm going to search for flower bouquet illustration on Google. This is one of my ways to find a color reference when I color florals. It gives me an idea what color combo I should use for my flowers and where to add shading on the floral images. So I'm choosing this illustration and I'm going to use pink, purple, and blue as my primary colors. I'll be using Canson XL cold press watercolor paper. I'm cutting down my watercolor paper into slightly larger than 8 card size using Timo's tonic paper trimmer. Then I'm going to draw a guideline by tracing along the edge of A2 size paper using a pencil. You don't have to do this, but I just wanted to have an A2 card frame so I know where I should stamp my images. I'm cutting down the top of my stamp packaging using Timo's paper trimmer. That way I can easily pull out my stamp set out of the original packaging while I'm keeping the insert card. I'm going to use the original Misty stamping tool to make sure I get good stamping impression. If you don't have this stamping tool, you could use a regular acrylic block or stamp press for stamping. I'm placing my watercolor paper over the foam pad inside the Misty stamping tool. I'll be using 4 magnets to hold my paper in place. I'm going to pull out my flower stamp from the bouquet of thanks stamp set and position it inside the A2 card frame on my paper. After picking up the stamp with the Misty cover, I'm going to ink up the stamp with the Versapine Onyx Black ink and stamp it onto the paper. If you want subtle image, you could heat emboss your image with white embossing powder. However, I love stamping with black ink to make the colors pop once I watercolor. Then I'm going to stamp the same image one more time on an ink-coated masking paper to create a mask. If you don't have this masking paper, you can use post-it note or print paper along with a temporary adhesive to hold the mask in place. I'm cutting out the image with my scissors and craft knife. You can cut right on the line or even slightly inside of the line. I'm going to layer my mask over the stamped image on my watercolor paper, covering the image completely. Then I'm going to stamp my image again over my mask, positioning the image partially onto the mask. Masking technique is a great way to create illusion of depth, as the image you stamp first is in the foreground and the second image is partially behind the first image. Once I have finished stamping over one image, I'm going to remove the mask. Before I move on to the next step, I want to show you how I clean my stamp. Once I'm done stamping, I clean my stamp with a microfiber towel that I bought at Costco after spraying some Hero Arts Ultra Clean. This towel is very inexpensive and easy to wash. You can also use Hero Arts scrubber pad by simply rubbing a stamp on the wet pad until it looks clean. I'll be taping down my watercolor paper on the chipboard sheet using washi tape. This will help prevent my paper from warping while watercoloring. You can skip this process if you want to, as long as you don't use lots of water for your watercoloring. Now it's time for watercoloring. Here I have my Mijello Mission Gold 36 watercolor set, round paintbrush number 2 and number 4, clean water, and paper towel ready on my desk. I'm going to mix my paint with clean water on my watercolor palette and load my paintbrush with a red color. Then I'm going to test out the color on a scrap paper to see the actual color. I'm applying pigment on my flower petal. Then I'm going to rinse my paintbrush and remove the excess water. Next, I'm going to go over the paint to diffuse the color using a wet paintbrush. I usually wet my paper with clean water first before watercoloring. This time, I'll skip the process of wetting paper to create a matte look. Since I don't plan to create a realistic look of my flowers, I'm not going to color my images in detail. Once I pick up some pigment from watercolor set with my wet paintbrush, I'm applying light color first for the base layer. Then I'll be bringing more colors to my image to add shading. I'm going to darken the value of watercolor by adding layers of the same colors. Then I'm going to soften the hard edges using a moist paintbrush before the paint is completely dry. I'm going to paint another layer before the previous layer is dry to add dimension and shading. If you let the paint dry between applications, you will be able to leave a harsh line between layers, which looks cool as well. The important watercolor technique to remember is that you are working from light to dark. When you apply a dry or more saturated stroke, you can put in color with just water. This watercolor technique is a great way to show light source or edge. I'm applying a stroke using a very little water and more pigment. Before the stroke is dry, I'm going to take a wet brush and pull the color out from the darker stroke. You can pull the color quite far depending on how dry that initial stroke is. I'm going to keep adding layers to achieve the dimension and shading I want. If you make a mistake with your watercolors or you have some paint went outside of outline, you can fix it by adding some clean water on the paper and picking up the colors with a paper towel or paintbrush. Just paint in the shape you'd like to lift out using clear water and dab away the water with a paper towel. Now I'm going to turn on some music and speed up the process so you can watch me color. I'll be back once I'm done watercoloring. To add some interest to my watercolor card, I'm going to add some paint splatters to the top portion of my watercolor panel. This technique is a bit random but can create some very fun results. So I strongly recommend you to give it a try if you haven't done so. I'm going to dry my watercolor panel using a heat tool to speed up the drying time. Then I'm peeling up the washi tape and removing my watercolor panel from the chipboard. I'm going to cut down my watercolor panel into 4¼ inch by 5½ inch using Timo's paper trimmer. After placing my sentiment stamp from the bouquet of thanks stamp set, I'm going to ink up the stamp with the first fine onyx black ink and stamp it on my card front. I made an A2 size top folding card out of Nina Solo White 80-pound cardstock. Then I'll be mounting my watercolor panel on the card base using double-sided tape. Do you think I added too much paint splatters? I'm not sure if this card would look better without paint splatters. That's all for today. If you have any questions, please leave comments below and I will be happy to answer them for you. I hope this video tutorial inspires to create a card with watercolors. If you like my video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you won't miss any new video from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time with another video. Bye bye!